Hey folks, Jamie Lundell here. Today we're going to go over a couple of different things about scabbard making. So really what I'm going to talk about right now is if you're doing a scabbard for a seax. So for instance, I have this guy here. You know, they generally have the shape with a bit of a flare back here where you'll have your piece you know, attached. So you'll have a couple of straps that come up off of this. But you can see I've done some tooling on here. Really the thing that I want to talk to you about for this video is how to, when you make your scabbards, or your sheaths as it were, with the seaxes, they don't have a welt. So that's one big difference between these and normal, you know, normal scabbards or sheaths. There's no sort of welt in there. But what you do have you have brass or silver or some kind of metal that will come up across here. You can see I have this templated out so that it follows very nicely along that line, and then there'll be a couple rivets that go in through here. And then up in this section there will be another piece of brass or whatever kind of metal you're going to be using. This is bronze. On here, this will have a couple holes punched in it, and then that's where the strap will go. Oftentimes you'll see there'll be a loop that comes up and over, and a ring goes through that. There's several different ways of doing it, you know, historically speaking. So, but this one will have slots. But what we're going to go over is basically, you know, this part is pretty easy, right? You know, you just got to lay everything out, punch your holes. You know, you want to have it so that you're sandwiching. You know, you have everything that is nice and mirror imaged so that it'll sandwich everything in. And you can see once all that's together, it'll look nice and be a good presentation for the scabbard. But really the tricky thing is this piece here, right? Because it's doubled, you know, and that can often be very tricky to make and to get to align correctly and be good. So the way that I go about doing this, I'm a big fan of the masonite templates. This one doesn't have the grid on it, but what I did was I laid my piece down after, you know, my seax will come in and the tip is in here somewhere. So I got this basic shape so that my blade will fit in there. I laid this down, I traced that line, and then kind of sketched in a secondary line to mirror it. I used calipers to make sure that things were fairly even going across. You can see, you can use these guys to say, all right, well, we got a little bit of room there, not a lot of room there, a ton of room here, wherever, and then you can even out your lines with the calipers. And then the nice thing about cutting it out of masonite first, at this point, what you can do is you go in with even a file, and you can file things down so you have lumps and bumps. You can take that down with a file and really come to a nice, even looking template. And from there, what did I do from there? So from there, I traced it down onto, this was like an old piece of folder paper, so something that's going to be a little thicker than just normal paper, like cardstock will be good, an old manila folder, you know, something of that nature. And what I did was I laid that down, this template down across here, very close to that edge, and I traced this down so you can see that this guy, and now here's the really tricky part, is making sure that this bend, this area, that is going to line up flat with the edge of your scabbard. So you can see that laying this guy down, that makes the line that I want. And by wrapping this over the piece, as it was kind of pre-cut out, you can see that it lines up. Now you can cut that out. Like mentioned before, I'm a big fan of making the templates, because now if you look at this and you say, well, this isn't going to line up at all, well, you need to redo it. Because the thing about this is, as it's open, you're going to have to cut a big chunk of bronze or copper or brass or whatever you're making this out of. You're going to have to cut away a big chunk, and you can utilize the inside for things like this, which is what I did when I made my template. But that's a lot of material, so if you mess it up, it's a lot of material gone, and you might not have enough material kicking around to make another one. But by making your template flexible so that it can go over, it allows you to say, all right, this will work. That does line up. Once that lines up, there's a little bit of adjustment that you can have in it, but you got to make sure that you're looking pretty good. And then once that lines up, then you got to just slowly bend things over and make sure that you're not putting any creases in, so you can always take your bend out and re-bend it if you need to. I hope that explained things pretty well. And it's mostly going from the hard template to then using that to produce a soft template, because like I said, it is this transition that is always the difficulty. That transition right there, and making sure that you have enough material accounted for it, and that this bends at the right, at the correct angle to come across. From here, we'll just mark out where our holes are going to be, and after that's done, I will have everything totally put together, or maybe not totally sandwiched together as I drill my holes. Otherwise, this guy has a tendency to, as you can see, it bends in, then your holes don't line up. Once holes start being misaligned, that's when all sorts of problems start cropping up. But I'll get this guy, the holes drilled in, I'll get it set down, and then one of the great things about this is from here, because I always leave a little extra material. Always want to make sure you leave a little extra material so you can go inside. You have that scrap. You can come in once this is all riveted down and use these rails as a guide for your knife to just cut that excess away. So let's go ahead and get these guys marked, and we'll go over the drilling real quick. All right, so what I've done is I just went through with my fine point Sharpie. I made a mark, and then using my calipers again, you can go ahead and mark even distance down your blade, or very close to even distance anyway. And it's important to mark this from the front, because if you do drill it and your hole drifts a little bit, you want to make sure that your rivet heads are centered going down this line on the front of your scabbard. So we have this guy marked. I then use my auto punch to set those in, and it's important to have a nice hard background surface. I wouldn't want to have this on here as I punched, because what's going to happen is if you don't have a hard surface behind it, since you're using a finer metal, something that's going to be softer like the bronze or brass or silver or whatever you're going to be using, that's definitely going to be soft, and as you punch onto a hard or a soft surface, you'll make a big dent, a dimple around where that rivet's going to go in, which in the end is not going to end up looking as good as it could. Right, so we want to make sure that we use a hard surface. I have a stone block here, and I basically just used that to to do my punching. So now we'll set this on here, go over to the drill press, and get our holes drilled. Now it's important to make sure that everything is lined up. If your back and your the front of your leather don't quite line up, like mine don't perfectly, make sure that you have the room that you need on the side that you need it. Alright, and once you get your first hole drilled, it's smart to put a rivet in the hole. That way you make sure things don't shift on you. Alright, so you can see that I've gone through, drilled those holes out. Once I put a pin in here, and I then drilled here, put another pin in. The more that you can support it to make sure that things don't shift around on you, the better off you are. You can see we're all set up. At this point, I'm just going to have to go and set these rivets, run a razor across here, and this section is all set. And then it's just going ahead and drilling the holes for this piece here. If you have any questions about how to go ahead and do more of these Viking style scabbards and whatnot, leave them in the comments, let me know, and I'll do my best to help you out. Hope that helped.